So now that we've talked about trade and capital outflows, we need to talk about currency exchange. So we're going to talk about the foreign exchange market, which is essentially the trading of foreign currencies. And for many, this little section here is quite interesting because you get to learn things that are going to be useful when you go traveling. Just general knowledge of how all of this works. So let's get started here. Trading of foreign currencies. So typically when you want to buy something in a certain country, you have to buy in that country's currency. And countries' currencies fluctuate over time. Like traded between US and Canada was for a certain amount of time. $1 would get you $1.50 Canadian. Then sometimes it's around $1.30. May not be anymore when you're listening to this video. And it was pretty close to parity at some point between the two countries. So things move around a lot. And if we look at this graph here, just focus on this bluish line for now, and you can see that the rate between Canada and the States has changed quite drastically. We'll talk about the real exchange rate in the next section, so don't worry about that just yet. But just know that it fluctuates a lot. And one of the things that can make the value of a currency fluctuate a lot, there's many other things out there, but that whole idea that we had with hyperinflation with the Germany example, where we saw that if you think, well, you could just print more money and buy more currency elsewhere, well, as you're printing more money, your purchasing power falls in your country, but also you're not getting more in other countries, so your exchange rate's falling at the same time. It's not meaning that you're in a terrible situation, it's just that, let's say it was one-to-one relationship, and now $1 gets you what, for $1 million you get what you used to get for $1. Well, it's probably going to cost you $1 million to get 1 unit of that foreign currency because it's going to drop relatively by the same rate. So how are exchange rates represented? So right now we're going to talk about nominal exchange rates, and every time we talk about nominal, it's something that we see. Real is something that's adjusted somehow. So here, nominal exchange rates, we could see it in two different ways. It's either US dollar per Canadian dollar or Canadian dollar per US dollar. I'd say focus on this one here, which is the amount of foreign currency per domestic currency that you could obtain. Let's see how this looks. We'll just take a quick pause here and see how this works. A good website to kind of get a look of it all is xe.com. So if I look here, like they'll have a bunch of different examples, different currencies, and I could add currencies, and there's other currencies down here. But if I look over here, I could see two different rates for Canada and US. I could see 78 cents or $1.27. The thing that you have to keep in mind is what's written here. One is the inverse of the other. So here, it requires 78 US cents to get 1 Canadian dollar. And it requires $1.27 Canadian to get 1 US dollar. So essentially that's what's going on. So you'll see if you multiply these two all the time, you'll always get 1 because one's the inverse of the other. Yeah. And if I think about like just the Japanese yen compared to the Canadian dollar, a few years ago I was in Japan not that long ago, and it was 100 yen to get 1 Canadian dollar. Now it's less yen to get 1 Canadian dollar. So which of the two currencies has appreciated? When it was 100 yen to 1 Canadian dollar or 88 yen to 1 Canadian dollar? It's the Japanese yen that appreciated relative to the Canadian dollar because now it requires more Canadian dollars to get 100 yen. For 1 Canadian dollar, you could only get 89 yen, where you could get 100 before. So we can't get as much yen per Canadian dollar. Therefore, our currency has lost value. So just something to keep in mind. So you have these two rates. And the one I'll focus on is this one here, because this is the amount of US dollars required to get 1 Canadian dollar. And if that amount goes up, it means that the Canadian dollar is gaining value. Let's go back to this. So I'd say if you look at an increase in E, the small one that we're looking at, the Canadian dollar has appreciated. because fewer Canadian dollars will be required to purchase that same foreign currency. So decrease in the as Canadian dollar has depreciated. Yeah. Another thing that some people think about when they think about these two rates is not necessarily these two rates that we just had a second ago, but we're talking about the bid-ask spread. So let's just go through another example here to make sure that that's clear with you guys. So let's go, I don't know, National Bank exchange rate. Okay. All right. Could be another bank, I just chose them. So if we look at this here, what we can notice is we have US dollar for Canada, we have 128 or 131. Okay, so we have this situation 124 or 131. So the bank buys US dollars and gives you a $1.24 Canadian, and if you want to buy US, you have to pay $1.31 Canadian. Whereas in the past, we saw that $1 US should be $1.27 Canadian. $1.27. This one's like 3 cents more. This one's about 3 cents. 3 cents less, 3 cents more. So there's this spread that happens. And why does this spread exist? Well, it exists because banks want to make money. If they were going to charge you the amount of money that you see here at every instant, and by the way, this page gets updated every minute, but you could update it quicker if you wanted to, if you refresh it, because these currencies always change. If you look at it in the morning, you'll see it's different in the evening. So if they were going to charge this rate here, well, if they're buying US dollar and giving you that rate in terms of Canadian, and then when they go to sell it, the US dollar loses value, they're going to lose money. But by creating some level of spread here, they're able to make money. And sometimes you'll notice that the spread may be bigger. So let's look at an example here, such as like Switzerland. Roughly the same value as the United States, so like 125 roughly each, but here 134. So a bigger spread. Why a bigger spread? Well, the main reason I could say that there is a bigger spread is if you don't trade this currency often, you want to make sure that by the time that some other people want to buy it from you, if you're the bank, you're still making money. So if it's not traded often, you want a bigger spread to make sure that it doesn't have time to fluctuate enough that you lost money on that transaction. But if it's something that you're buying and selling quite frequently, that spread's not as high. So it's just something to look at. You want to really look at these figures when you go to get money out. Some people think, well, it's better to get money out before traveling. Sometimes at the airport, it's not going to be the best situation. They'll have extra fares. But sometimes it's just at the ATM at the location that you arrive. So I'd invite you guys to just do a test one day and see, like, get out like whatever currency that you're going for at a few different locations and try to see how it fluctuated in the day, and maybe you'll find out that where it's most advantageous is not where you would have thought initially. That's going to help you in the future and looking at all these currencies. So that's a good brief intro of nominal interest rates, exchange rates. We're going to talk about real exchange rates in the next section.